Aloha, I'm Reverend Tim Lytle, Senior Minister here at Unity Church of Hawaii in Honolulu. And we are so grateful for all of you who watch us on our YouTube channel. We know with you that as you view these teachings and apply them to your lives, that it helps to build your life into the very best one that can be imagined. If you're ever in the area, please come and join us for a service, and please enjoy the message that you're about to watch. Aloha. Today we're looking at let's get an alignment. So we're going to get just a little bit of an alignment this morning. And I'm looking at different faith traditions, as we go along. I want to wish all of you a happy Rosh Hashanah. Happy Rosh Hashanah. Yeah. Jewish New Year. And this is the day in Hebrew theology and thinking that Adam and Eve were created. So as we were looking at the daily word that was being presented by Brian just a little bit ago, talking about the creation of humankind, this is the Jewish birthday of Adam and Eve, and it is the time where we, in Jewish tradition, look at how did we live in the last year? Was it good? Were there some things we would change? Are there some things we would alter, do differently? And what would we want to do differently in this coming new year? What would we want to do to create the life that we know that we're called to do? So we have this picture, and we have here the Hebrew, right? It reads right to left. So that's like an R. This is like an S or a SH sound. So Rosh, and then in Hebrew, you only see the consonants. Now, sometimes there's vowel markings for vowels, And it was my most challenging class in seminary was Hebrew. Very, very intensive. So Rosh Hashanah. And what you see here is honey and an apple. Apples are dipped in the honey to wish for yourself a year filled with sweetness. And then typically there's also pomegranates. Pomegranates are just packed with lots of seeds. And those seeds represent all the good good deeds that you're going to fulfill in the upcoming year. So it's a time of reevaluation. It's a call to prayer. And they blow the shofar, the ram's horn, as a call to prayer. So this week, we are calling people to prayer for the World Day of Prayer. We're calling people to really go within and do some introspection and some cleaning house and some organizing. Because the power of the month is order. And we want to put things in its proper order, in its proper perspective. So I want to share with you what Rabbi Jesus shared from the Torah. Now, I tried to contact my Torah teacher today. Did you contact yours? Did you? Good. To wish him a happy Rosh Hashanah. My rabbi teacher, mentor, and friend, Rabbi Nisim Wernick, and he, for 5.5 years, was my Torah and Kabbalah teacher and mentor. And he, very big spiritual influence in my life. So, Rabbi Jesus is going to give us some things from the Torah. Oh, wait. First of all, have you ever been in this position? This is getting in alignment. So let's get in alignment. Okay. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to come back to this scripture. Okay, Matthew chapter 22. Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." This is the first and great commandment that comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6, called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And then this statement follows in verse 5 of chapter 6. Then Jesus quotes from Leviticus 19, also in the Torah, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now it's important to get these things in alignment, to get them in order, to first know that we are here for God and for God alone. Some people don't like that statement. Okay, just sit with it. Just be with it. And see why, if that makes you uncomfortable, does that make you uncomfortable? To think that we're here for God alone. Does that somehow interfere with your ego? Does that somehow interfere with your material conditioning? Does that somehow interfere with how you view the world based solely on the sense consciousness? Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of the Unity movement, taught us that there is a much greater reality than the things we experience with our senses, than the things that we see and hear each day, that there's a much greater spiritual dimension that is the absolute realm, the realm of God. And so Jesus encourages us to first love God. Love God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind. We are first to be immersed in love with God. Are you in love with God? Is it a love relationship? Or is it a long-distance relationship? Or maybe it's not even a very good relationship. Maybe it's more like a postcard once in a while. Are you in love with God? Deep love, prema. The second, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So first we align knowing our love for God and love for each person. Just as there is love for ourselves, we need to have love for ourselves as well. Those three components are all integral, all one. So in Unity's principles, our first principle is there is only one presence and one power, active as our lives and as the universe. God the good, omnipotence. The second principle is since there's only one power and one presence, that means every single one of us are a representation, an outpicturing of that presence. Thirdly, that means that the thoughts that I hold in my mind, the things that I'm nurturing in my spirit, have the tendency to be created because we are one in that divine mind. So fourth, we align ourselves with divine mind by prayer, by meditation. And fifth, we don't just learn this stuff. We actually base our lives on it. We do it. We act on it. So if we find ourselves out of alignment, not acting out of love, not acting out of our alignment with God, not acting out of our alignment with each other, not acting from a place where we're really loving ourselves, then we're out of alignment. If you've been to a chiropractor, I remember going to Eric's room here at our wellness center and hearing all sorts of pops. I couldn't even count them. We went pop, 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 pop. You know, getting into alignment spiritually is really focusing on that one power, that one presence. Now let me go back here. 1 Corinthians chapter 14. I don't know if you know about the church in Corinth. Let me tell you what a church history professor of mine, Paul Bassett, said. Because he asked me one time, Tim, what is it you're wanting? I said, I want to return to the time of the early church. Now that doesn't mean like the 7 a.m. service of church, okay? The early church being the very beginning days of Christianity. I want to go back to those days. Oh, it was so awesome. He's like, really? Tell me about how awesome it was. And he said, Tim, every single book of the New Testament, every single book of the Christian scriptures was written to address problems that were occurring in the early church. We would not have a New Testament if there were not all kinds of problems in the early church, because all of them address problems. And if you're not aware of the problem that those books are addressing, it's very likely you will take them out of context. Okay? So the church in Corinth, Paul probably wrote 4 letters to them. We have 2 of them in the Christian scriptures. And in 1 Corinthians, if you can look at the first couple of chapters of 1 Corinthians, they had all kinds of problems. They were quarreling with each other. What? Spiritual communities quarreling with each other? How could it be? People that love God, they're arguing with each other. They're each insisting that they are right, and therefore others must be wrong. And they're ready to smack each other in the head. You can read about this in the first couple of chapters of 1 Corinthians. I mean, they were really having some problems. They were having challenges. Now, that didn't mean that they weren't believers, didn't mean they weren't devoted, but they were still very, very immersed in the ego. They wanted to be right, and they wanted to make others wrong, and they wanted to make all kinds of separations, and they wanted to dominate, and they wanted the ego to be in charge. Paul wanted to straighten them up. And so he wrote 1st and 2nd Corinthians to them, and sometimes used some very, very strong language. I mean, in one of the chapters, he even encouraged to kick someone out. He wanted the body to work together, not against itself. So the church at Corinth had something like an autoimmune disease. You know what an autoimmune disease is? An autoimmune disease in the body is when the body is fighting against itself. The church in Corinth was fighting against itself. And as long as it was doing that, it could not fulfill its mission. It could not do what it was there to do. It could not be the divine presence it was called to be. It could not change and rock the world in which it was called to do. And Paul didn't just sit by and say, oh, that's okay. Everyone do your own thing. He slapped him up the side of the head a few times. Not physically, I don't think. Because he wanted the very best for them. He loved them as a father loves his children. And so he said, let all things be done decently and in order. Order is the power of this month. Order is the power to sequence things, to organize things, for things to be done in their proper way. Ever driven down the highway when someone did not stay in their lane? And you're right next to them? I remember driving down the highway, and those real big trucks, those 18-wheelers or whatever? I was right next to him. And I was in a little itty-bitty Honda Civic. I had my lights on. That didn't make any difference. He kept coming over, and I was going on to the shoulder of the road. I thought, I'm going to survive one way or another. I'm going to go onto the shoulder, and if he comes over further, then I'm going to go into the field. But he was obviously having a hard time staying in his lane. That happens with people too. People sometimes get out of their lane and steer into someone else's lane. Steer into someone else's business. And we may honk the horn and they may say, hey, I have the right to do this. Paul was addressing that, saying, let all things be done decently and in order. That is, stay in your lane. how do we stay in the lane? By doing those things that Jesus taught us to do, that I showed us just a minute ago. To love God with all our heart, our soul, our mind. Now, if we do that, trust me, that takes care of a lot of issues. If we're putting God first and foremost in everything we do, it has the tendency to line us up. I've been in some big Kansas thunderstorms. On Highway I-35 that goes from Texas all the way north. I've been in some big thunderstorms where you could not see, except I could see one little piece of a yellow line on the highway. And I would stay just following that line to get to my destination. If you make God first and foremost in your life, then that steers you in the right direction, rather than worrying about everybody else and trying to fix them. Stay in your lane. So, when we love our neighbor, when we really love our neighbor, really see them, see the divine as them, regardless of how they may be acting. You know, sometimes people don't always act pono. I know, it's hard to believe, right? Sometimes people don't always act nice, don't always act in a respectful way. I mean, Jesus and all the faith traditions of the world have taught us to treat others the way we want to be treated. It's a very simple premise. You know, when I was in kindergarten, I would hit other kids in the head, and one day someone hit me in the head, and I thought, oh, that's what that feels like. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Do you want to be hurt? Then why hurt others? Do you want to be disrespected? Then why disrespect others? Do you want the highest and best for your life? Then want the highest and best for everyone else as well. Every morning, I'm out on my lanai. Those who are watching online, a lanai is like a balcony, a porch. And so I'm out on the balcony facing Tantalus Mountain. I meditate and I pray and I chant. And every morning, there's a girl and her mother. And they come out in the morning, and she's got her backpack on, and they're waving at me. We've never physically met, but they wave to me every morning. And it just touches my heart, because it reminds me that we are all one. We're all in this together. When that previous hurricane was coming our way, and then I was at a grocery store, and it was kind of a madhouse, you know, and the shelves were being cleared off. I had this wonderful time of connecting with people because I realized we're all in this together. And that's the truth of it. We're all in this together. We either rise together or sink together. We're in this together. In unity, we believe in the oneness of all people. No matter how they show up, no matter what their faith tradition, no matter what, we see each person as that divine presence. And as I was praying on my lanai this morning, I recognize that all these people, these hundreds of people that surround me as I'm sitting there on the lanai, each one of them are that divine presence here on a unique journey, here experiencing something that may be for them at this moment very difficult, as I saw one woman who seemed to be grieving. I realized each one of these people are the representation of God. God resides in each one of them. And all I could feel was love. If we would approach life centered on love, centered on God, centered on seeing the divine in one another and seeing that divine presence in ourselves. I mean, do you have a hard time seeing the divine in yourself? Do you have a hard time receiving a compliment? Do you have a hard time believing that you're going to have the very highest and best in your life? Does your mind fight against that? If we recognize that divine presence in ourselves, then we can see it in others. Going into this Unity World Day of Prayer, there is a prayer that we will say together, and this is an alignment prayer. You know, it just so happened that the official prayer for the Unity World Day of Prayer is about alignment and bringing ourselves into alignment. Let's say it together. Aligning my mind and heart with the mind and heart of God, I center myself in pure being. In a state of spiritual realization, I remember I can never be broken, limited, or unworthy. Courageously, I rise into my true spiritual nature in this moment of healing. I heal the whole of me as I accept that I am brave, I am bright, I am beautiful. As I heal in body, mind, and spirit, I support healing in my family, my community, the earth, and the world. Centered in pure being, I am a healing presence. We are here to be a healing presence in the world. I'm going to be talking more about that next Sunday as I talk about let's have a radical rhodostomy. Sounds like a medical procedure, doesn't it? Let's have a radical rhodostomy. The birth of Radha. We're going to look at that divine energy, creating, living as us, touching our world, because we are here to be a healing presence. Too many of us waste our time complaining. And I'm talking to myself here too. I have a no complaint bracelet on. It's a complaintfreeworld.org. And, you know, it's to remind me to not complain. And every once in a while, my spiritual mentor, Olga Lucia, says to me, would you please take that bracelet off? Because she sees me not living in alignment with it sometimes. Once in a while. We waste so much time complaining rather than realizing we are the light of the world. That's what Jesus called us to do. We are here to bring healing to our world. Let's do this together. Aloha. Thank you.